Okay, great. So another session today, and today we'll be talking about creating post-sale plans. And I've got Maggie Bree with me here. She's a financial advisor for UBS and works with investment management services with a focus on pre-transactional planning and multi-generational wealth transfer. And we actually met at one of the ACG networking events. Really good to have you here, Maggie. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me, Lynn. I'm delighted to be a part of BizNexus, and this is such a wonderful opportunity to talk about some of the post-exit planning strategies.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I'm really glad to have you here. And I think that's one of the important topics that maybe needs a little bit more attention, especially if it's an entrepreneur or has held a business for a long time, or we're just like your focus there with like wealth transfer. It's an important topic. So let's jump into it. Maybe can you start off with telling us a little bit about the process in creating a post-sale plan?
Absolutely. So first, want to just acknowledge the importance of a transaction itself. So oftentimes having a great, robust, comprehensive succession or exit plan strategy can be a business owner's best investment that they can make. Knowing if, how, or when to actually engage in that exit itself can be just as important, if not more important, than actually the decision to actually start the company itself. So we find that with business owners, they tend to actually neglect the planning until the ninth inning. And this is a loss. It's something that we want to actually understand their objectives really from the onset. So when we're working with business owners, we help them think through their objectives, not only in terms of their own life after the exit, but also with what to do with the business itself. So first, thinking about their own life, are they planning on transferring this to existing members of the family? Are they interested in maybe pursuing another venture? Are they charitably inclined? We ask them all these different strategies or different objectives that they have over the course of their lifetime. The one next thing that we think about is in terms of their objectives for the business itself. So again, what do they want to do with the business upon handing over the keys to someone else? Do they want to transfer this to members of the family? This tends to be, and it continues to be, one of the main strategies for intergenerational wealth transfer in this country, and oftentimes a main way that the business owner is able to pass along their legacy to the next generation. If this is not an area of interest, they're also able to pursue potentially a private sale to maybe a competitor, a business partner, a family office, or a private equity firm. They're able to pursue maybe transferring the ownership to existing employees or the management of the company. Or finally, a less worn path, but one again worth pursuing, is a public offering, so via an IPO. So then engaging, which option makes sense for them, and then thinking through of how we're going to engage that. The next step is to then craft and assemble a team of advisors that is able to, again, articulate the business owner's objectives, really structure the sale or the transition in a way that's maximizing those objectives, and then thinking through all of the different factors. So the main roles and the players in this team include a CPA. So this is going to be someone that's integral to understanding the business operations. They'll do some of this really robust tax planning on the best ways to structure the deal or the transition, whether it be a C corporation make sense if it's a stock sale, or if it's going to be able to qualify as a qualified small business stock. They're able to, again, really play a main role in thinking through the income tax planning, not only for the business, but also for the business owner. We'll also want to hire an investment banker. Ideally, this is someone that has experience or expertise in the industry itself. They'll be able to assess the value of the organization, identify some potential buyers. We'll want to hire a M&A attorney, someone that will work hand in hand with the investment banker in making sure that there are favorable terms for the negotiations of the contract itself or the exit. So thinking through whether there's going to be an earnout, or if the business owner needs to continue playing some sort of role in managing the transition, if it's going to be a sale, or again to management team, or to a private, maybe some of the transitioning it off to family members, for instance. We'll want to hire an income tax planning attorney. So again, thinking through the analyses with the CPA. And then also hiring a trust and estate attorney who's going to draft trusts for the proceeds. We'll also be able to analyze if it makes sense to transition or transfer some ownership interests to the family members in irrevocable trusts. And then finally, a financial advisor who's going to be doing the pre-sale financial planning, being really that quarterback between all of the other players in this team, and thinking through and devising and implementing the strategies that come as a result of the planning process itself. So this will be the person that's going to be really the linchpin in making sure that the planning is going according to pace and is actually being implemented according to the business owner strategy. So again, really assembling the right team provides the proper foundation in articulating the business owner's goals and then implementing and structuring the exit in accordance with all those different factors.
Yeah, thanks for that. That's a good summary, I think. And that's something that we always come back to when we talk about that. Enhancing that business value and planning for that exit is that it's a timeline, right? With having the time to actually implement things that would enhance the value at an actual exit. And what's the timeline that you usually look at and that you recommend business owners when creating this post-sale plan?
In short, the earlier the better. We often find that business owners spend more time in the business than actually on the business and thinking strategically. And so few business owners actually begin the business with the end in mind. Based on our research, over half of business owners eventually plan for an exit to take place, but have no formal strategy or plan to actually achieve that exit that they want. So thinking through as early as possible really gives them a lot more flexibility. And so it provides benefits in terms of having, again, assembling the right team that is able to determine and articulate the business owner's objectives, not only for their own life, but also for the life of the business and the legacy of the business. And then we're also able to, again, be a little bit more proactive in addressing and anticipating different considerations or problems that might arise over the evolution of the business. And then a lot of different strategies that we have, again, in terms of transferring ownership of the company to family members or thinking through some of the tax planning strategies, again, of maybe being able to structure the business as a qualified small business stock or restructuring it as a C corporation. Some of these actually take years in advance. So if we have time on our side, we don't need to necessarily, again, implement them right away, but we can at least explore them and determine if it makes sense or is an area of interest for the business owner.
Yeah, absolutely. And so are we talking about months? Are we talking about a couple of years, many years?
We find that years in advance, business owners find that they have a lot more satisfaction with the terms of the sale, that they feel that they have a lot more ownership and satisfaction on the sale itself if they actually engage in that planning years in advance.
Yeah, that's a common answer, I would say. And how would you recommend that a business owner think about the proceeds from that transaction?
So again, when we start working with a business owner, often the business tends to be the biggest line item and the biggest variable on their actual personal balance sheet. So we start by really helping them think through what their objectives are for the business. And then also providing some sort of clarity and thinking through what is going to happen post-exit or post-transition. So we want to make sure that their core needs are in place. Do they plan to retire? Do they plan to start a next venture? Do they need to retire? Do they need to start a next venture? Do they have any upcoming wedding expenses? Do they have plans to buy a second home? We want to think through and get this all out on the forefront as early as possible to make sure that they have a value that they'll receive from the business that will be able to support their lifestyle expenses adjusted with inflation again over the course of their life. So we want to make sure that their core needs are met before really pursuing any other strategies and making sure that they find comfort. So we run this plan that is giving them that confidence and clarity that the decisions that they're making will really provide for them regardless of the potential variations in the market outcomes or variables that are outside of their control. So once we have a clear understanding on that picture, we want to segment the proceeds and invest them according to 3 different strategies. One is a liquidity bucket. 2 is a longevity bucket, and finally 3 is a legacy bucket. So the first is a liquidity bucket. These are needs that the business owner will need for the next 3 years. So thinking about taxes or travel in the near term, potentially another venture, or if they have primary home that they would like to purchase. So these are needs that these are funds that they're going to need access to over the next 3 years. This money is going to be conservatively allocated, and we think that segmenting these funds really helps protect against some behavioral biases when investing large sums of money for the first time, especially in a volatile market environment like this. A lot of times we find that business owner clients find comfort in the fact that these funds are more conservative, they're less prone to fluctuations in the marketplace, and therefore they're able to spend from them with much more peace of mind. Second, we'll have the longevity bucket. So these are needs these are funds that they'll need access to beyond those 3 years. So thinking about retirement, healthcare spending, maybe weddings down the line, maybe a second home. So we're going to want to allocate this a little bit more aggressively. Again, still somewhat conservative to protect it against market fluctuations, but we want to make sure that the business owner will be able to spend from this portfolio adjusted with inflation over the course of their lifetime. And then finally, we'll have a legacy bucket if there's capacity that we determine with a high probability of success that the business owner will receive enough money after taxes to support their lifestyle, that they actually have needs and funds that they'll be able to pursue other goals that are beyond their own, whether that be transferring to family members, gifting to family members, or pursuing charitable ambitions and goals. So these are going to be funds that have a time horizon of decades, not necessarily in the immediate term. So we're going to want to allocate them much more aggressively so that they're able to sustain and grow over the course of the duration of these legacy goals.
Yeah, super. I like that approach. That's what you talked about in the beginning. There is a very holistic approach, which I think is really good for it's the biggest asset normally, right? Just like you said. And then you need to be very careful and look at your whole life, and the proceeds that you need, and dividing them up into liquidity, longevity, and legacy is great. Thank you for sharing that. That's a nice approach. And we're jumping on to the last question here. So, if we would talk a little bit about pitfalls and common mistakes that you see based on your experience, and kind of maybe some mitigation strategies, if you could talk a bit about that.
Sure. So I think that there's 2 common pitfalls that occur for business owners. And one, again, is not engaging in the planning as early as possible. So there are so many different strategies that require years in the making and are maximized if actually engaged prior to the sale. So this can be whether transferring ownership of assets outside of their taxable estate to family members. This can be really important if done in advance of the sale, because not only transferring the assets to potentially different trust structures, they'll be able to receive a favorable discount. So using less of their gift and tax exemption in transferring those assets to funds outside of their taxable estate. And then if a transaction occurs, then that growth will occur outside of their estate as well. So these are some strategies that are really maximized if we have a lot of years in the making. Similarly, we're able to really have a better understanding of their ambitions or their interests with regard to charitable organizations and charitable goals. Getting this all out in the forefront we're able to really plan a little bit more strategic. And we're especially right now in this environment in which between now and the end of 2025, we can take advantage of some favorable gift tax exemptions that are expected to decrease in half come 2026. So really acting with this in mind, at least thinking through whether it makes sense for the business owner, is really a best strategy. Another is also engaging the family members. So a business owner might not actually want to transfer the interests or of the actual day-to-day operations to their existing family members, but may still want the family members to benefit from the success of the organization and the business as a whole. Regardless of whichever succession path that they decide or the exit strategy that they decide, it's best to still engage the family members in these types of conversations. Based on our research, 25% of business owners do not actually talk to the next generation about wealth. And we think that this is a huge loss, and we lament this when we're talking to our business owners. And also, based on our research, we find that typically there's a lot of commonalities that we find for intergenerational wealth transfer. So the first generation will be the one making the money. The second generation will enjoy the money. The third generation will actually spend the money until there's little to nothing left. So how are we able to make sure that the odds are not stacked against them, and we're able to mitigate some of these commonalities? And it really comes down to having an open dialogue or conversation. No matter how impactful one singular conversation can be, it's very difficult to actually just achieve that much in a singular conversation. So having regular planned meeting discussions about the dynamics of the family, the dynamics of the business, uniting them around other causes beyond the business itself, whether it be different charitable missions or charitable goals, these can serve as a linchpin for family members and can make sure that the legacy of the family is continuing, even if the actual operations of the day-to-day of the organization are no longer in the hands of the business itself. Yeah, I'd say that those are the main pitfalls that we see is, again, not prior planning in advance, that are not taking advantage of and thinking critically of the favorable trust and estate and exemptions that we have right now. And then again, not thinking through the ramifications and ripple effects that whatever the business owner's end goal is in mind, and not communicating it with the rest of the family members.
Okay. Yeah. Great. Thank you for sharing those two. That's valuable for business owners to look out for and avoid and plan for over the long term. Thank you so much for sharing and for joining me here. If anyone would like to get in touch with you, I'm gonna have your contact details in the show notes. And thank you again so much for joining.
Thank you so much, Lynn. I really enjoyed this conversation, and I hope that you enjoy the rest of your day.
So did I. You too. Enjoy.